Hey, what's up? This is Zan from the Saturday Scholars. Just want to run through a few quick thoughts from our first week of action of college football. And the main one that really comes to my mind is Clemson. I was really thinking about this, and I'm sure Clemson fans are tired of thinking about this, tired of talking about it, yada, yada, yada. But when you look up and you look at the Clemson roster and you look at what you expect this Clemson team to be, or what this program has been historically in the last 10 years, then obviously you're kind of on a downward trend here, right? So the real question is what to make of a 34-3 loss to the Georgia Bulldogs. You could say, sure, they do that to everybody. Georgia is Georgia. They are him. Georgia kind of just massacres everyone they play, i.e. TCU in the national championship, i.e. so many other teams that were on their schedule in years prior. Sure, I get that. I do understand that. But this is Clemson. This is a team that was winning national titles not too long ago, that was competing for national titles not too long ago. And now we had the advent of NIL dollars, and the whole thing is just changing. The way that this game is played, the way that this game is managed, the money, the dollars, the culture that goes into it. And look, I respect Dabo. He has accomplished so much at Clemson, and I will say right now that this video is not a Dabo slander video in any stretch of the imagination. Clemson was very middle tier at best before Dabo, and when Dabo got hold of the reins, he brought them into a consistent, perennial national title, contender. But the problem here is that has Dabo's time run its course? Now, a lot of people like to think that Clemson has been underachieving. And let's just kind of run it through it by records here. You can argue Clemson's been underachieving, but this is also relative to the bar that Dabo himself has set by elevating Clemson to such a high degree. I mean, just look at it. Last year, Clemson went 9-4. That is one of their worst records in a very, very long time. You go back to 2022, they went 11-3. 2021, 10-3. And if you keep going back, you're going to be hard-pressed to find more than 3 losses in a season for a good long while under Dabo Swinney. So, what does this tell you? This tells you that Dabo's still doing a pretty dang good job over there. And Dabo Swinney, despite his inability to adapt, inability to change, do all these things, is still a dang good coach and dang good program builder. Because I got to tell you, if 9-4 is the worst season you're going to have in a really long time, then he's clearly doing something right. And when we look back, sure, I get it. Over the course of the years, this feels like Clemson is underachieving because they are a perennial favorite in the ACC. 3 losses, and then 4 losses, as we just mentioned. But you got to hand it to the man. He has built that program up from basically just mediocrity into a powerhouse. But the problem here is, and I'm sure all Clemson fans are kind of tired of discussing it at this point, is just his inability to adapt. And so this is what begs the question. Do you move on from Dabo Swinney? Because you at least know with Dabo Swinney, you at least have a solid floor. Or at least in the short run until the next wave of conference realignment and so on and so forth. Who knows, maybe not taking players in the transfer portal, considering that he took 0 players last year and only 1 player in the year prior. He's very against that. Maybe this stuff will come back to bite Clemson as we get deeper into the NL era and the structuring and some of this legislation that might get passed, that allows players to get some revenue sharing. I get all that, but you really have to ask yourself introspectively, if you're a Clemson fan, do we move on from Dabo Swinney? Yes, we are grateful for everything that Dabo Swinney has done for us. Yes, we are grateful and appreciate everything that Dabo stands for. Because yes, Dabo is willing to die on this hill, but at the same time, you kind of have to admire that the man sticks to his guns and his values. That is something I do respect about Dabo Swinney. Now, in regards to this particular situation and the portal as it is and the new NIL era, it's just not the way to be. And me personally, I do think Clemson needs to look elsewhere in the future if they continue to underachieve. That 34-3 loss was quite telling. This Clemson team, look, I know that the quarterback situation is a little bit iffy. Kate Klubnik doesn't really seem to be the guy there. The Garrett Riley experiment has so far looked not very fortuitous for the Clemson Tigers, as many of us thought it would be, given that, bloodline. But I think if the Clemson Tigers have another 3-4 loss season, I think it might be time to move on. And I think that is very much a possibility after we've watched that game. I mean, Clemson held their own in that first half. I mean, they were playing Georgia tit for tat, but that offense is just so dang bad. And some of these teams in the ACC, like Miami, are really bringing it this year. Clemson's got their work cut out for them, and it's not going to get any easier. And I know Clemson fans have had so much victory in the last 10 years or so. And I know that they don't want to remain stagnated. Nobody who's competing for national championships, winning national championships, is going to sit there and say, I'm cool with 10-3, 9-4, as long as we're competitive. No. A 10-3 should be your worst case scenario. For a program like Clemson and what they've become, great job, Dabo. You have built the foundation for Clemson. But ultimately, I really do think it is time for the Clemson Tigers to move on if Dabo cannot right the ship, or if Dabo is unwilling to change. Because if you fall into mediocrity and you do that for too long, it's going to affect the image of your school. People forget a lot these days. We're so, obsessed with being on our phones, all these different things. People have very short attention spans. These kids, if you fall into mediocrity for 4, 5, 6 years, these kids are not going to remember the Clemson that was the Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence Clemson Tigers. You need to uphold your reputation. And that is by taking the reins in this new NIL era. So, the real question is, who would you bring in to replace, Dabo Swinney if you were to fire him? Would it be someone like Lance Leipold, Chris Kleiman? Those are certainly good program builders who have done it at, Kansas and Kansas State alike, some Sunflower State coaches, but these are guys that have proven that they can do it. Some guys I would support in that cause. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. Dabo's inability to take in transfers just because of his own stubbornness. It's not like Clemson is not a destination where premium players would want to go. They recruit premium players. So you can't tell me that Clemson can't stay competitive and at the upper echelon of the ACC and of all of college football if they just play ball a little bit. And if Dabo's not willing to play ball, Clemson will fall into mediocrity forevermore until Dabo decides to hang it up. Quite frankly, it's a tough situation as a Clemson Tiger fan. If you sit there and you fire a coach, it's kind of a lose-lose situation. If you sit there and you fire Dabo Swinney, you're firing a man who has won you national championships. You're firing a man who has gotten you in the national championship against Bama over and over and over again. But if you don't fire him, you run the risk of your whole trajectory of your program slowly falling apart and slowly dwindling into mediocrity, and maybe even sub-mediocrity. It's a tough decision because either way, you're going to look like a bad guy here. Either way, you're going to lose one way or another. But I say, rip the Band-Aid off. Probably time for Dabo Swinney to move on. Probably time for the University of Clemson to move on. And add Dabo Swinney to the University of Clemson Hall of Fame. He deserves it. And give him a little statue outside the stadium. But other than that, man, Clemson football, you are now entering a very critical time in your history. Because these other schools that have been winning so much, that have all this pocket change, they can spend it now. If you're not willing to play ball, you're going to get passed. If there's any Clemson fans that are watching this video, let me know what you feel about this. Should Dabo stay or should he go? This is Zan signing out.